There is a kind of power hidden inside bones. When paleontologists lift a fossil from rock, they do not just hold a skeleton. They hold a life story carved by injury, luck, risk, and time. Dinosaurs lived in a hard world. Rivers flooded, forests burned, predators hunted, prey fought back. Yet some dinosaurs did more than survive a day or a season. They healed from terrible wounds. They grew old when most did not. Their bones show bite marks that closed over with new growth. Their ribs healed crooked but strong. Their skulls show scars that tell us the animal kept living after a violent moment had passed. In the late Jurassic of Utah, a powerful predator called Allosaurus moved through a world of fern prairies and conifer groves. At the same time, a plant eater called Stegosaurus grazed with a body plan like a moving fortress. Stegosaurus carried a row of plates along its back and a tail with 4 long spikes. That spiked tail has a name that people love to say. Paleontologists call it the thagomizer. The name began as a joke in a comic strip, but the weapon is no joke at all. It was heavy, it was sharp, it moved fast. At the Cleveland-Lloyd Quarry in Utah, a group of fossils suggests a violent meeting between these two dinosaurs. The quarry has given science many bones of Allosaurus. It has also given bones and spikes from Stegosaurus. At this site, one Allosaurus tail vertebra holds the most important clue. The vertebra is punctured by a hole about the size of a small fruit. The shape and size match the business end of a Stegosaurus tail spike. The bone's edges around the hole show healing. New bone began to grow and try to seal the wound. This is how we know the animal was alive when it was injured and that it lived on after the attack. The story inside that injured Allosaurus unfolds like this. An Allosaurus targeted a Stegosaurus from behind. The predator aimed to bite the hindquarters. The Stegosaurus swung its tail. A spike struck the Allosaurus tail, drove into the vertebra, and then came out. A small fragment of spike tip or keratin may have broken off inside the wound. Paleontologists have suggested that this may explain why the inner part of the hole did not heal fully. A piece of foreign material inside bone can keep a wound from closing. Infection can follow. Yet the Allosaurus did not die right away. The injury was serious. The animal was in pain. Still, the Allosaurus walked away and lived long enough for healing to begin. That fact alone is striking because the tail is full of nerves and blood vessels. The tail is crucial for balance in a two-legged hunter. A hole in a tailbone means a limp, a struggle, and a fight to keep up with life in the Jurassic. Stegosaurus bones from Cleveland-Lloyd Quarry also tell their side of the conflict. Researchers have described Stegosaurus tail spikes with broken tips. Some of those broken tips show smooth, rounded edges. That is what healed bone looks like. The implication is straightforward. A spike snapped, perhaps during a fight with a predator, and the animal survived long enough for the spike to heal. A Stegosaurus throat plate from another site shows a U-shaped chunk missing along an edge that fits the outline of Allosaurus teeth. That bite did not cut an artery or pierce the windpipe. The plate did its job as armor. The Stegosaurus lived. The scars connect predator and prey. At Cleveland-Lloyd Quarry, we can see Allosaurus and Stegosaurus as opponents in a contest that did not always end in a kill. The Allosaurus that carried that tail wound proved hard to finish. The bone tells us that pain did not stop the animal from moving, hunting, or scavenging. The bone tells us that this dinosaur bent but did not break. It belonged to a creature that, for a time, simply would not die. Shift forward tens of millions of years to the late Cretaceous. The landscape is the region we now call South Dakota. The rock unit is the Hell Creek Formation. A herd of duck-billed dinosaurs called Edmontosaurus grazed on riverbanks. Edmontosaurus had a strong tail, a deep chest, and a tooth battery that ground plants to pulp. Edmontosaurus lived alongside one of the most famous predators in history, Tyrannosaurus rex. Paleontologists David Burnham and Robert De Palma studied a fossil that changed a long and heated argument. Many people have asked whether Tyrannosaurus rex was mainly a hunter or mainly a scavenger. The fossil in question is a pair of Edmontosaurus tail vertebrae that had fused together with extra bone growth. Between the vertebrae sits a broken tooth crown of a young Tyrannosaurus rex. New bone had formed around the bite wound. The growth has a shape that happens when bone tries to knit across damage. It proves that the hadrosaur was alive when it took the bite and then lived long enough for healing to take place. The Hell Creek Formation gives the place its name, but the fossil has given science a clear storyline. A young Tyrannosaurus rex sprinted after an Edmontosaurus. The predator caught the tail and bit down. A tooth snapped off and stayed in the wound. The prey tore free and ran. The predator lost the meal. The prey survived. In this case, Tyrannosaurus rex did not eat. In this case, Edmontosaurus lived. The tooth in the tail was a kind of calling card. It carried the shape of Tyrannosaurus rex. It silenced anyone who claimed that Tyrannosaurus rex could not hunt live prey. It cannot be a bite placed on a carcass because the bone healed. Only a living animal can lay down new bone. The fused vertebrae also show that the injury was serious and that the tail changed shape during healing. It probably affected the way the hadrosaur walked. It may have bent the spine slightly. It did not stop the Edmontosaurus from finding food and staying with the herd. Ken Carpenter, a paleontologist who has studied many dinosaurs, pointed out what this fossil means for behavior. This is a case where the hunter lost. Even apex predators make mistakes, or face prey that fights back. The term apex does not mean perfect. It means top of the food chain. Life near the top is still risky. Young predators learn by trying. Some attempts fail. The Edmontosaurus with the Tyrannosaurus rex tooth in its tail turned failure for the hunter into a second chance for the prey. It walked away with a wound that later closed. It is a member of the small club of dinosaurs who escaped a deadly bite and kept going. Now step into what is today Wyoming, also in the late Cretaceous. A horned dinosaur called Torosaurus latus moved through open woodland in large herds or small family groups. Torosaurus latus is closely related to Triceratops. Torosaurus latus had a long skull with two brow horns over the eyes, a short nose horn, and a very large bony frill with a pair of oval openings inside the shield. The name Torosaurus latus refers to a white and impressive frill. The frill is bone. It is not soft tissue. It is a shield. A particular skull of Torosaurus latus found in Wyoming carries a nickname. The skull is called Nicole. The details on Nicole matter. On the left side of the frill, there are gouges and punctures that match a bite. The spacing, depth, and outline are consistent with a bite from a large theropod. In that place and time, the most likely bite maker is Tyrannosaurus rex. Nicole also bears damage to the nose horn that later healed. Healed bone has rounded, remodeled edges. Fresh breaks do not. These rounded edges tell the same consistent story. Nicole was bitten on the frill. Nicole suffered damage to the nose horn. Nicole lived on. The armor was not decoration alone. Andrew Fark and other researchers studied Triceratops skulls with holes and scars. They found patterns that fit horn-to-horn combat between members of the same species. Two Triceratops would clash and sometimes drive a horn into the other's frill. Those holes often healed. These frills took blows and saved lives. If such armor worked against the horns of another ceratopsid, it could also work against a predator. In Nicole's case, the frill took the bite and kept the teeth from the neck and throat. A Tyrannosaurus rex bite is a serious matter. The jaws close with great force. The teeth are thick and edged. If the teeth grab, neck muscle, or a major vessel, the victim dies. If the teeth sink into the frill and do not reach the soft parts of the body, the victim has a chance. Nicole's frill carries a scar that proves the dinosaur had such a chance and used it. The line of healed bone on a skull is not a boast. It is a record that the horned giant lived through an attack. Nicole's skull, with its healed nose horn and frill wounds, reveals something else about life histories. The brow horns of ceratopsids change through growth. The bone surface texture on a frill changes with age. Nicole shows features that suggest a mature individual. A mature female with healed wounds teaches us that horned dinosaurs lived long enough to suffer and recover. Nicole is part of the theme that runs across all of these cases. Dinosaurs were not fragile. They recovered from major trauma. They did not fall the first time fate tested them. Every person who has seen the great Tyrannosaurus Rex in the main hall of the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago, Illinois, knows the name SU. Sue is the nickname given to the Tyrannosaurus Rex, whose skeleton stands there today, and the nickname honors Sue Hendrickson, who found the fossil in South Dakota. Sue is one of the largest and most complete Tyrannosaurus Rex skeletons ever found. The bones are about 90% complete. The skeleton is massive and detailed. It allows scientists to read health, injury, disease, and age with rare clarity. Sue lived to a great age for a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Growth ring studies in the bones place the age between 28 and 33 years. That makes Sue a senior. Most Tyrannosaurus Rex individuals did not reach their 30s. Sue did. The skeleton shows what it took to last that long. The right side of the rib cage includes ribs that healed after breaks. The shoulder blade shows damage. Tendons in that area were likely torn at some point. This would have limited the movement of the forelimb. The vertebrae and tail show wear and arthritic changes that match an older body. The left fibula is thick and irregular. The shape fits a long, stubborn infection or a chronic bone disease. Then there are the holes in the jaw. The lower jaw and parts of the skull bear round openings. People have argued about the cause. Some suggested infection by a parasite that affects birds today. Others have pointed to bites from other tyrannosaurids. A study published by scientists at the Field Museum of Natural History in 2022 described healing around the edges of some of these holes. Field Museum of Natural History paleontologist Jingmai O'Connor has spoken about this point. The healing shows that whatever created the holes did not kill Sue. Sue lived after those injuries too. All of this lets us write a life history that is full of hardship but also full of evidence for survival. Sue grew fast as a teenager, as Tyrannosaurus Rex did. Sue reached adult size. Sue hunted or scavenged. Sue fought rivals or clashed over carcasses. Evidence from related tyrannosaurids, such as Daspletosaurus, shows bite marks on faces. Tyrannosaurids likely bit each other during disputes. We cannot say for certain that the holes in Sue came from another Tyrannosaurus Rex. We can say that Sue carried injuries that healed and lived with diseases that did not stop daily life. It is worth pausing on the idea of a predator with a bad leg. The left fibula was diseased. Walking would have hurt. Hunting would have been harder. Still, Sue did not starve. That means Sue found food, perhaps by stealing from other predators, perhaps by taking down slower prey, perhaps by using experience to avoid dangerous injuries late in life. Sue's rib fractures closed, the shoulder area scarred and stabilized, the jaw wounds remodeled, the body carried on. The mount at the Field Museum of Natural History is famous because it is powerful to look at. The scientific value is in the details. The healed ribs are not just bones. They are proof that Sue fell or was struck and kept living. The thickened lower leg is not just a shape. It is proof that Sue's immune system fought infection for a long time and won enough battles to extend life by years. The jaw holes with healing edges are not gaps. They are proof that Sue had a disease or an injury and pulled through. The Field Museum of Natural History display is a monument to endurance. Wounds are one kind of story in bone. Age is another. In the Jurassic of what is now New Mexico, a very long sauropod walked the floodplains. This animal was first called Seismosaurus, which means earth-shaking lizard. Later studies placed it as Diplodocus hallorum. The bones of this dinosaur reveal a life of great length. When paleontologists cut thin slices of the bones and looked at them under a microscope, they counted growth rings. These rings form somewhat like tree rings. They do not form perfectly each year, but over time they give a sense of age. The bones of Diplodocus hallorum show at least 60 growth rings. That means this animal died at about 60 years of age. That is an old dinosaur by any standard. The bone tissue also suggests that Diplodocus hallorum had only just reached full skeletal maturity near the end of life. This hints that the animal might have lived even longer had events turned out differently. A decades-long life for a giant plant eater says a great deal about resilience. Young sauropods were vulnerable. As juveniles, they were small enough for many predators to attack. Reaching adult size took time. After growing large, a sauropod had fewer natural enemies, but it still faced disease, drought, and the mechanical strain of a very large body. Diplodocus hallorum reached 60 years and still shows signs of active bone growth late in life. That tells us that the body kept repairing and remodeling for a long span of years. Another very large sauropod named Supersaurus, with the nickname Jimbo, also shows signs of an advanced age. In that case, the bone rings are hard to read because the bone remodeled so much over time. That in itself often points to great age. Supersaurus Jimbo, like Diplodocus hallorum, is a symbol of endurance through time rather than through a single fight. Now move to the other side of the world and a bit later in time. In Patagonia, in Argentina, paleontologists found a huge predator they named Meraxes gigas. Meraxes gigas belonged to the Carcharodontosaurid family. It was not a tyrannosaurid, but it had a large head and small arms. Studies of growth rings in Meraxes gigas bones showed something surprising. The animal died at about 45 years of age. That is an extreme age for a giant predator. Earlier work on tyrannosaurids suggested that many Tyrannosaurus rex individuals died in their 20s. A 45-year-old Meraxes gigas means that at least some large predators lived twice as long as many Tyrannosaurus rex. That does not make Meraxes gigas better. It makes Meraxes gigas very informative. It shows that some carnivorous dinosaurs could maintain their bodies and find food for nearly half a century. Think about what that means in terms of daily living. A long-lived predator must survive fights with prey. It must avoid crippling injuries. It must heal after it falls or slips or collides with something. It must keep its teeth and jaw healthy enough to feed. It must find territory or switch to scavenging when necessary. It must raise the odds in a world, where a broken leg or infected bite can lead to a slow end. The skeleton of Meraxes gigas shows signs that growth slowed near the end of life. That is expected in an old animal. The important point is that death did not come early. It came late, after a lifetime of survival choices and recoveries. The details from each case build a pattern. Allosaurus in Utah took a spike through a tailbone and did not die at once. Stegosaurus at the same quarry broke spikes and healed. Edmontosaurus in South Dakota ran away from a bite by Tyrannosaurus rex and laid down new bone around a trapped tooth. Ken Carpenter said, "This shows the predator loses sometimes, and he is right." Nicole the Torosaurus latus in Wyoming took a bite on the frill and a blow to the nose horn and kept living. Andrew Fark's work on Triceratops frills supports the idea that these shields were not only for display, but also for defense and battle. Sue, the famed Tyrannosaurus rex in Chicago, lived with broken ribs, a bad shoulder, a diseased leg, and a jaw full of round holes that later showed healing. Field Museum of Natural History. Paleontologist Jingmai O'Connor pointed to the healing along the jaw wounds to show that these holes were not a death sentence. Diplodocus hallorum from New Mexico reached about 60 years of age, which is a kind of resilience that comes not from a single dramatic moment, but from a lifetime of avoiding the end. Supersaurus Jimbo hints at great age through busy bone tissue. Meraxes gigas in Patagonia reached about 45 years and shows that a giant hunter could carry on for decades. When you place these stories on a timeline, you see that the ability to heal and endure was not rare and not limited to one group. It shows up in carnivores and herbivores, in Jurassic and Cretaceous, in North America and South America. The recurring theme is clear. Dinosaur bodies could take damage that would be fatal to many modern animals without medical help, and then those bodies could repair themselves. The repairs are not perfect, but they are enough to keep the animal alive and moving. Bone is living tissue. It bleeds, it grows. It listens to stress and responds. A scar in stone is proof that a dinosaur did not die the day a spike or a tooth hit home. Each of these stories rests on a specific method. Healed bone is different from unhealed bone. Under a hand lens or a microscope, remodeled bone has a different texture and pattern. The edges of a healed wound are rounded. There are small channels and woven areas that show the work of bone-building cells. A bite made after death will not show this. A break that killed the animal will not show much rounding. In Allosaurus from Utah, the tail vertebra with the puncture shows healing at the edge. In Edmontosaurus from South Dakota, the growth is thick and bridges two tail vertebrae, showing that the bite happened, the tooth stayed, and the tail later fused while the animal lived. In Torosaurus latus Nicole from Wyoming, the frill wounds and the nose horn damage have the round shape of healed injury. In Sioux from Chicago, the ribs show complete or partial calluses. The leg bone is thickened by extra growth, and the jaw holes show remodeling. Growth ring studies require careful work with thin sections of bone. Not all bones preserve rings well. Rings may be erased by remodeling. Different bones can grow at different rates. Scientists often look for the external fundamental system, which is a layer the bone forms when growth has slowed to a halt or to a very slow pace. Diplodocus hallorum shows many rings that point to at least 60 years. Supersaurus jimbo shows remodeling so intense that the precise count is hard. Meraxes gigas shows late life slowdown and a count near 45. The methods are the product of decades of careful study by many teams. The names we mentioned, such as David Burnham, Robert De Palma, Ken Carpenter, Jingmai O'Connor, and Andrew Fark, represent a much larger community of people who dig, prepare, section, scan, and interpret fossils. It is tempting to think of dinosaurs as movie monsters or as museum statues. The fossils described here show living animals. An Allosaurus with a hole in a tailbone is a limping hunter trying to stay upright and stay fed. A Stegosaurus with a broken and healed spike is a plant eater that faced danger and did not freeze. An Edmontosaurus with a Tyrannosaurus rex tooth in its tail is a herd member that sprinted toward water or cover and won a race for life. Torosaurus latus Nicole is a horned herbivore that met a predator face to face and used bone and horn to deflect a fatal bite. Sioux is an old Tyrannosaurus rex who carried pain and disease and stress for years and yet kept going. Diplodocus hallorum and Supersaurus jimbo show that some dinosaurs found a way to last decade after decade. Meraxes gigas shows that even a giant carnivore can reach old age. These stories also give us a more complete way to talk about extinction. It is true that most non-avian dinosaurs died out at the end of the Cretaceous. It is also true that resilience was common before that event. Bones with scars show an everyday toughness. Bodies that repair show natural healing. Lives that last 60 years show a slow and steady fight against time. When the final crisis came, many lives ended at once. Yet the pattern before that day was not a pattern of fragile beings. It was a pattern of survival under pressure. There is one more lesson that fits the human world. Paleontology often looks like a science of death because we study what is left after death. But the data we value most come from signs of life. Healed bone is a sign of life. Growth rings are a sign of life. A fused joint is a sign of life. A scar on a frill is a sign of life. The list of names matters because real people gave their time to find and understand these signs. David Burnham and Robert De Palma traced the Tyrannosaurus rex tooth in an Edmontosaurus tail. Ken Carpenter explained what it means when a predator fails. Jingmai O'Connor and the Field Museum of Natural History team studied jaw holes and how bone repairs itself. Andrew Fark and others studied frill wounds in horned dinosaurs and what those wounds say about behavior. The Utah Museum of Natural History preserved the wounded Allosaurus tail vertebra so people can keep learning from it. The Field Museum of Natural History displays Sioux so visitors can see details that speak about a life lived, not just a skeleton. If you stand in front of Sue in Chicago, Illinois, and look closely, you can see small details that change how you feel about that skeleton. A healed rib tells you about a fall or a struggle. A thick leg bone tells you about a long battle with disease. Round jaw holes with healing tell you about pain that did not end the story. If you visit Utah and walk the grounds of the Cleveland-Lloyd Quarry, you can think about a tail vertebra with a hole and a predator that walked away with a wound that did not kill it right away. If you look at a cast of the Edmontosaurus tail with the Tyrannosaurus rex tooth inside at a museum, you can point to the fused bones and say this dinosaur got away. If you see images of Nicole, the Torosaurus latus from Wyoming, and read about the frill wounds and the healed nose horn, you can tell the story of an armor plate that protected a life. If you read about Diplodocus hallorum in New Mexico, also called Seismosaurus in older news, and about Supersaurus jimbo, and about Meraxes gigas from Patagonia, you can say that some dinosaurs did not only beat injury, they also beat time. The title says that these were dinosaurs that literally could not die. Of course, every life ends. The meaning of the title is this: when death came early for many, these animals held it off. They were not unbreakable. They were repairable. They were not untouchable. They were recoverable. They were not perfect hunters or perfect prey. They were persistent. The rock record proves it, name by name and bone by bone. Allosaurus and Stegosaurus in Utah. Edmontosaurus and Tyrannosaurus Rex in South Dakota at Hell Creek Formation. Torosaurus latus Nicole in Wyoming, with the help of Andrew Fark's work on Triceratops frills. Sue in Chicago, Illinois, with guidance from Jingmai O'Connor and many others. Diplodocus hallorum from New Mexico, known for 60 years of growth. Supersaurus jimbo with old bones that remodeled again and again. Meraxes gigas from Patagonia, a hunter who reached 45 years of age. In the end, the lesson is straightforward. When you study dinosaurs closely, you meet living things that tried, failed, tried again, and sometimes won. Their bones carry the record of those wins. That is why these stories still matter. They show that life does not only begin, life also repairs. Life also adapts. Life also holds on.